Welcome to another episode of the Eric Crocker Show. I'm your host, former NFL and AFL defensive back Eric Crocker, and of course, it's Wednesday morning, so we are joined by Coach Dezi. We're going to be talking to all things 49ers. You got a big splash trade with Chase Young. How would that affect the defense? How would that affect the front end, the back end, Nick Bosa, the secondary, just this team and the defense? I still have one concern. People think I'm tripping, but we're going to go over that. All right, and also Brock Purdy. We know he was coming off of a concussion. He got cleared prior to the game. He had another impactful hit where his head hit the ground. He covered his head. We're going to discuss all things with concussions with Coach Dezi this morning. So before we get started, I see everybody in the chat going up right now. Let's go. I see the flame. People excited for Wednesdays. All right. So we got Mr. Olay. He says, let's go. All right. We got CB Niners. All right, everybody's saying good morning. Good morning, Bree. Good morning, Ricardo. There we go. Niner Gang Tays in the house. All right, with his flames going up. Let's go. All right, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. And, of course, man, we got the 209 folks in the house, man. Stockton, California. What's up? Let's go. All right. Let's talk about it first. The 49ers made a big trade for Chase Young. And I'm not gonna lie, like that was something that I know I flirted with the idea of it in the offseason. Bleacher Report would have me come on and they wanted me to discuss splash trades the 49ers can make, but you never truly think that you look at potential guys that might be able to be traded, right? Chase Young, he missed a lot of time due to injuries in his career. Obviously super talented, number 2 overall pick, but it wasn't playing out maybe quite the way they wanted to, especially after the knee injury. All right. So we saw that they also didn't pick up his 5th-year option. So that was a telltale right there that a lot of teams, especially if they're losing or maybe are they in the hunt, if they're not, what they'll start to do is have kind of a fire sale. And if they have no intentions on bringing a guy back after the year, which clearly maybe they weren't with Chase Young, it might have been too expensive, et cetera, whatever the case is, they're like, you know what? We didn't pick up his 5th-year option. Let's just trade him. Trade him to the 49ers. So I didn't think the 49ers could get him. I know all of our eyes were set on Jalen Johnson, a cornerback. But in some cases, I think that having a Chase Young is not as good as getting a Jalen Johnson, but it definitely helps the back end. You look at the 49ers, the way they're built. They've always been built from the front to the back, right? And they haven't really poured a ton of resources into the secondary. They're kind of like drafted guys mid to late rounds. They don't have like one veteran that they might have spent a little money on, but they don't do like the Miami Dolphins who like they load up on cornerbacks. They load up on safeties, right? Look at the Dolphins. They got Jalen Ramsey. They got I can't think of his name right now. Number 25. He's always getting interceptions. Led the league in interceptions one year. Can't think of his name right now. But anyways, number 25, that's a big money guy. They went and got Javon Holland at safety. He's a guy that, they drafted early in the 2nd round. They also at one point drafted Minka Fitzpatrick, So, some teams put a lot of resources into that back end. The 49ers haven't, but I do think that Chase Young potentially can help the back end, help Nick Bosa, help guys like Armstead and Hargraves, and the better your front end, the better hopefully your back end. But what were some of your thoughts when you saw that trade go down?
What a deal. What a deal. Even if he doesn't work out, we didn't lose a lot. So I am stoked about the deal that we got on him. And if it's a win like we did with McCaffrey last year, I'm here for it, right? We need to do something. Defensively, we're not putting the pressure on the quarterbacks the way we need to. Is he the answer? I would love for it to be that. I kind of also would love to have had a cornerback as well. Kind of like you said, I would love that. JJ would have been the complete set for me. For those of you who follow me on Twitter, I was like, all right, baby, one more, let's get it in. But just didn't happen. So I think it's a clue into what the 49ers also feel is lacking, right? They put the resources there. I feel like they went all in on that front line in hopes that will be the answer to make all the things click. Do you think it is?
I hope so. I mean, I've talked about this a lot. In some years, I've did more of defending the back end guys. Like, they're not really as bad as y'all think they are. They play well. But that was when it was like, Kelly Witherspoon, like, he would have his streaks of, like, playing well. Richard Sherman, like, he was all-pro. Tart, Ward, like, Shark, K'Wan Williams. Like, I thought the secondary was, like, good. I'm like, no, they're good. Like, and everybody's like, no, you got to go get this guy and get this guy. This secondary is not that secondary. All
Right.
right, like this secondary right now, they do need help. I do think that they are more of a weakness than what we've seen in years past. Some people have brought up the years of 2011 to 2013, where you had Terrell Brown and you had Chris Culliver and Carlos Rogers and Whitner and Goldson. Like, to me, those secondaries were good. Like,
Yeah.
they were good. You were able to do a lot with them. They all like kind of understood their roles. They were able to play a little bit outside of their roles. They all had like some level of like versatility. And I think this is the first secondary in a while that I'm actually a little bit at a loss of words. It's like I can't really defend y'all. Like, I can't. What we're seeing, you just have to hope that, hey man, they put a lot of resources into the front. Hopefully that can be the difference. So when we do look at a guy like um, Chase Young and the effect that he can bring, we just got to collapse that pocket just faster. And you think about 2019, the one thing that really helped. Again, I thought the back end was like good. I thought they played very well, but it helped to have D Ford screaming off that edge when healthy. It helped to have Nick Bosa, how great of a rookie year he had from a pressure standpoint. Then you had double-digit sacks by both DeForest Buckner and Eric Armstead, right? Like, that was like a tremendous D line. I think that they're hoping to get back to that. I think they're hoping to get back to that just super dominant front. But even then, this back end is not as good as that back in from 2019. So Tart, he was a guy, he did his job very well. Ward did his job very well. They didn't get the interceptions, they didn't get the takeaways, but they were so versatile and multiple in what they were doing and really good at that. And I'm not sure you're quite, even Keller Witherspoon, for everything he was or wasn't, like when he was on, he was arguably the best corner on the team, right? Like, and he played at a high level when he was on. The tough thing is sometimes he'd just be really off. So, but then Emmanuel Mosley stepped in and he was really good, right? So I think we can have that thought of the front end being so good that it protects the back end, but I just don't know if the guys on the back end right now are as good as what they've had in the past. And I think that might be one of the things that might be getting overlooked a little bit in this, because I think everybody's just like, oh, you have a great D line, you got a great pass rush, like it helps the back end guys, but I don't know
Yeah.
how much you can help these guys right now. Right
Yeah,
now.
no, I'm still concerned about the AFC. I said that a couple weeks ago. I was kind of nervous about going into the Cincinnati game. And that's why the AFC teams have these really well-oiled quarterbacks that they don't take a lot of time in the pocket. They don't need, they don't need to. They can be out, boom, throwing. And so, unless your pass rush and the front is so fast and quick, which maybe, right? But you're still going to rely on that secondary. And I don't know that I see the leadership in the secondary the way I did, like, let's just say when Jimmy Ward was there. I don't know how you feel about that, but I just don't know that there's someone that's stepping up in that secondary as a leader, even to help facilitate communication. I just think communication might be the underlying issue on both sides of the ball for our team.
We got Khalil Young in the chat, and he says, Croc, you bugging. We made the NFC Championship game with Josh Norman on the roster. And it's like, you know what? That is true. But outside of him, look at the rest of the secondary. Ward, Jimmy Ward, Tart, you either had like K'Wan Williams, or I'm trying to think of 2000, who they had in the slot that year. But also on the other side, Emmanuel Mosley, right? Like, so you just had, a lot of times you'd have just better like options. I think the Norman year was, I think you still had K'Wan Williams that year with Norman. Did you? Gosh, I'm getting my years all mixed up right now. But the Norman year, you had young Embry Thomas, young Diamondo Lenore, but you had Emmanuel Mosley. And then you had the two safeties who had been there, right? Like Tart and Ward. Like, again, for everything they weren't, right? Like, they were not these playmakers in the sense of like they're going to get you interceptions. And we saw the drop pick and how that kind of affected 49ers from Jaquiski Tart in the championship game. But in overall, like, Norman was the one weak spot. Right now, there's multiple liabilities back there.
Right.
So I think that's kind of like the difference. Matter of fact, here we go. Christian, he says, Ward was in the slot last year, wasn't he? I think that made a big difference, having Jimmy Ward even playing in the nickel spot last year.
Right.
So, I just think that the secondary was in a better position in prior years, and right now they're kind of it's a little bit more of a liability. So they are loading up on the front end, and I like that, and I like going out and making a splash trade to go and get a
Absolutely.
talent like Chase Young. It does not hurt, and if there's a way you can keep him along for the long haul, then great. Then now you're talking about, and I don't know how it might be like a. I would assume based on what he feels like he is, and again, right now he comes into the 49ers leading the team in sacks. He has 5. That's more than anybody else on the 49ers right now. So if he continues to lead the 49ers in sacks, what type of payday will he expect to have in the offseason? So I would assume that he might be looking at this as a 1-year rental and an opportunity for him to make a lot of money in the offseason. 49ers are looking at it as an opportunity, as a I say 1-year rental, really like a 8 to 12 week rental, for the rest of this year.
Right.
And then, all right, go make your money in the offseason. But can you just help us win a championship this year?
Right.
Do you think they did enough to really help the defense? We talked about the secondary and how I feel like they're kind of lacking. But do you think that this one trade is the one thing that's going to help put this defense over the top?
It'll help. I'm still concerned about the secondary, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I really am. I think we go against a team like Miami. I mean, our guys cannot keep up. I mean, no one can keep up with, the cheetah, but they're just fast. I mean, I just don't know that I have confidence there. Can it be overcome? I mean, that depends on coaching, right? And even that, I'm kind of just I don't know.
All right, so let's talk about the coaching, okay? Because there are a lot of people. I see a lot of questions in here. I start some of them. What coverage can you run to pair it with the rush? All right, so that's one question. We got Coach Dezi here. He says Wilkes was playing man to man too often with zone cornerbacks, less D-line stunts and blitzes, and we will be fine. So, and I think I heard Richard Sherman kind of echo those sentiments right there.
Yeah.
What they're asking of Wilkes. And okay, let's talk about Wilkes real quick.
Okay.
So I do believe that Wilkes is kind of being the scapegoat here a little bit. And part of it is like, look, these are the secondary guys y'all gave me. And I saw somebody say, man, outside of Ward being in the slot, it's kind of like the same secondary as last year. And I would say that to a certain extent, but maybe that makes a big difference having that nickel Ward, right? Like
Right.
Isaiah Oliver got beat for 2 touchdowns against the Cincinnati Bengals, like 2.
Right.
Isaiah Oliver, in his last 20 targets, he's been targeted 20 times in the last like 2-3 weeks or whatever. He's given up 100% of catches. Right. So maybe that makes a big difference with that not being Jimmy Ward in the nickel and being somebody like Oliver. Or maybe if you put, we'll see if they can figure out a way to slide Lenore in there, right? But at the end of the day, I thought last year, I didn't think the pass rush was good. I think a lot of people are glossing over that, right?
Yeah.
Like we look at it like, oh man, 49ers. I got my brother here. He's a Cowboy fan. Everybody looks at the 49ers D line like it's always good. I'm like, last year they weren't really good like that.
No, and Eric Armstead was injured for a number of games.
Yeah, he gave you 0 sacks. It really was Bosa and the crew. Like it was like there were some guys that like could do some things well here and there, but it was Bosa. Like Bosa was really carrying that, and he had to be great. Bosa had to be great to really help with what looked like to me a very inconsistent pass rush, and from a productivity standpoint. So then this year, all of a sudden, Bosa, who did not have an offseason with the team, did not do OTAs, did not do training camp, did not do preseason, didn't do any of that. All of a sudden, he's having kind of a slower start. And I think because of that slower start, even though you brought in Hargraves, who's a defensive tackle, I think you're feeling the effects of him not being quite himself, and then how that affects the rest of the defensive line. All right. So in comparison, right, if you're going from where the 49ers were last year to like, let's say the Eagles, who had the best pass rush. Eagles got 70 sacks last year, 49ers 44. All right, like we're talking about 25 sack difference over the course of a regular season to show kind of a gap between, hey, this is a really good, and then this is where y'all are, which y'all are decent, but not great. And I think right now, what Wilkes is trying to do is try to figure out how do I manufacture more pressure? How do I get more pressure? How do I get, because I'm not getting it from my front. Bosa is not himself. Hargraves is a defensive tackle. It's hard to just continue to get great pass rush from there. Like, how do I get more pressure? So he's blitzing more. He's trying to play more man to man. I think throughout these first 8 games, like he's trying to figure it out. Like
Yeah.
what's going to be best for this team, because he doesn't know these guys. Right?
Right.
It's not like he's Robert Saleh who had so much time to like figure out what was going to work most for his guys. And any transitions that they went through, he kind of just was able to kind of transition into it with his guys. It's not like it's D'Amico Ryans, who had been with the 49ers since 2017.
Correct.
You know, everybody looks at D'Amico Ryans for when he was defensive coordinator. He had been in every meeting with Robert Saleh on what they were going to do, how they were going to attack it. You bring in an outside guy. And Kyle Shanahan, one thing he's been amazing at, right? And there's been a lot of things Shanahan has been great at. But one thing he's been really amazing at is identifying coaches that really understand what it is he's trying to do. So I think Wilkes gets it. I just don't think that his guys are playing up to the level to really help what he's doing work out on the field. And in turn, is everybody's trying to figure it out. And this is the first time I've seen finger pointing, right? And I was talking to one of my coaches, Coach Rob. He's like, man, I've never seen the 49ers finger point like this. I've never heard them start to like try to make excuses or point blame. They just figure it out. They just fix it. And right now, because you have a 3-game skid, which we haven't seen in years, and you're so used to one side of the ball being able to carry the other side, everybody's trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And Wilkes is just trying to figure out, how do I utilize these guys, because I can't just rush forward. Like I heard Sherman, just play zone and rush forward. Like that's what they're great at. Pin your ears back and go. And he's like, well, he's tried that and they weren't getting any pressure. They were getting diced up by Matthew Stafford. So then he's like, all right, let me play more man and get some blitzes. And guess what? They blitzed at Stafford. They got to him. They sacked him. They played more man. Diamador Lenore got an interception. They forced the errant pass. Oliver had an interception, right? So like he's like, oh, it worked. But then the next week is like, oh, damn, it didn't work. And then the next week is like, okay, well, let me try this, So I think that Wilkes, who again, in my opinion, is kind of being the scapegoat in this situation, he's just trying to figure out players and figure out where they fit in. And I saw a comment, I don't think I started, but I saw a comment basically saying like, man, if he doesn't win with this D line, like he's not good. I'm like, man, I don't know. I think he's just trying to figure it out. But that's just my thoughts. What are kind of your thoughts on that?
Oh, in the words of Taylor Swift, we need to calm down. Like,
okay,
we, Niner Nation, need to calm down. We need to take a big, deep breath in, exhale out. Okay, they are working on figuring it out. There have been a lot of changes. We're missing Omenahu. We're missing Ward. We're missing Aziz Al-Shaair. I love that guy. These were some pillars, I think, that we overlooked and didn't think they were as key players as we're seeing, right? So there's been some changes there. We have a new defensive coordinator, like you pointed out, not from the inside. He's an outsider. He's coming in. He didn't get to transition as smoothly. We as 49er fans saw a beautiful transition from Saleh to D'Amico. And so we just have that expectation now that it's supposed to be a smooth transition. I actually watched this game against Cincinnati and felt like there were moments where the defense was starting to show me some things that I was like, okay, I see what they're trying to do there. I saw the edges come together. I saw the pocket kind of come down. When Eric Armstead got the first sack, I said, guys, I think another one's coming, because I started to see some pressure. I started to see some things happening. And so I think you're right. I think it's on the brink. I think it's coming. Is he going to knock it out of the park every week? No, I think there's players need to tackle. We're missing a lot of tackles. We're missing, there's just careless, fouls and things, flags. I mean, we are our worst enemy right now. And so I think once we start to clean some of those up, I think we'll start to see a little bit more of what is attempting to be done, right? Because he's trying to do something, but then I think, was it Fred Warner that said that we're just not executing? And he kept repeating, we're not executing, we're not executing. He's like, I'm sorry, I keep saying this over and over, but this is kind of, maybe it was Hufanga. I think it was Huff that was saying it in an interview I watched. And I think that's really it. Like, it's hard to critique him if what he's calling is not being enacted the way that it's visualized. We don't know how many things are happening in routes that aren't, miscommunications, things like that. There's a lot. And so it's pretty interesting. I look at how all the comments that we're making as fans, and I'll just compare this to medicine, right? So it's like, how many times have I worked in the ER or been in the office, in a surgical office, and patients are like, I've been waiting for fill in the blank, however much time they've been waiting, right? My appointment was an hour ago. Yeah, but behind the scenes, we had to take a call on an emergent case. We have to figure out something happened with a surgery that we did last night. We had to work somebody else in because they might be having a post-op complication. Like, there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes that patients have no idea what's going on. And we kind of have to be like, we get it. We know that there's a lot that you're expecting of us, but this is the train wreck that's happening that you guys don't get to see. And I feel like that's the 49ers, right? Like, we can chat all we want, but they are the only ones that truly know what's going on, where the problems are, and the opportunity to fix it. And unfortunately, all we can do as fans is have faith in the fact that we've got excellent coaches. Our head coach is constantly being, slated as one of the best in the league. Now, I think that's not saying that we're without mistakes and there's not critiques that can be made. But we all have to take it with a grain of sand, because we're not behind the scenes. We're not talking to the players. We don't know what the vibe is like. We don't know how the communication's happening. We don't know what's happening behind these closed doors. But I do think I think I put it on social media. Wink has my hope in his hands. I'm riding on his predictions, and we're gonna keep the hope alive. That's all I'm gonna say.
Right. I see Coach Big Dez here. He says jumping in and out of coverages is going to make the guys play more hesitant and not play with speed. And I understand that. Like, if you are, which most defenses are multiple. Most defenses, they do a lot of different things, but they do a lot of different things based on what they like to do and what they do well. Right now, it feels like the 49ers are trying different things, but not doing one thing exceptionally well. And I think, again, a lot of it starts with where you've invested your money and not generating a consistent pass rush. Like that's where it starts. And they're getting close, but they're just maybe not like getting home. Like Bosa, he's near the top of the league, like in pressures and QB hits, like, So from that standpoint, like that's great. But, dang, the sacks, like to just in that drive or to put them behind the sticks 8 yards, like, where are those plays? The forced fumbles, like where are those plays that I think the defense really kind of needs from their front guys? Now, we've seen some fumbles, the secondary forced a fumble in the red zone last game, right? But we need some of that pressure from the guys up front as well. We also see a comment here from Khalil Young, and he says soft coverage, 6 to 8 yards off of wide receivers isn't cutting it. But the interesting thing there is we got some people saying they're playing too much man, and we got some fans thinking, oh, they're playing too much zone. They're off. Because if you see guys 6 to 8 yards off, like that's zone. That's probably quarters, right? They run a lot of quarters too high. So which one is it? And I think that the 49ers are trying to, figure that out as well. And they're hoping that bringing in Chase Young could really help kind of speed up the processing, or try to speed up the processing of a quarterback, make him throw errant passes and make him throw passes before he wants to. So we'll continue to see, monitor that, especially as you get into next week and you have the Jacksonville Jaguars, who before the season, it's like, oh, that's a win. Now it's like, dang, 49ers on the 3-game losing streak, and Jacksonville Jaguars, have 2 losses on the year, and they're playing like good football. And it's like, and you got to go to Jacksonville. So I've been thinking about going to that game. Me
and Mom are going to be there. I have an extra ticket for Chapman's event. So, but my mom is already, I can't even, I'll never put her on social media because I can never guess what's going to come out of her mouth. But she was like, these guys better not lose. I'm going to Jacksonville and spending all this money. I was like, Lord of mercy. So if you see 2 rowdy ladies in the stands, it's probably us.
Yeah, I might go to that game. All right, so I talked about how I felt like Wilkes is kind of being scapegoated a little bit because I just think, okay, the defense isn't playing great. Now, here's the thing. Through the first 5 weeks, defense playing awesome, playing well enough. I heard some people say, well, there were some issues, but they were being masked. However you want to spin it, the defense was a top 5 unit, number 1 in scoring defense through 5 weeks, right? Like there weren't any issues of Wilkes being in the booth, and now all of a sudden you go on a 3-game losing streak, and it's like, oh, he needs to be on the field. It's like, nobody cares. My guy, Will Blackman, shout out my guy, Will Blackman. He played 12 years. He called me yesterday, and he's like, Croc. Like all coaches have their preference. That stuff's not a big deal. Like, you still get to talk to the guys, or you have a coordinator related to him or like an assistant coach or whatever. But he's like Gus Bradley. Like there's Fangio. There's all kind of coordinators who are in the booth. And it's never been the issue. This is only an issue because 49er fans are trying to figure out like what the hell is going on. So then they're asking Kyle about it. Kyle's like, well, I don't know. I'll see if he's better on the field. I don't know. But in my opinion, and I asked this question on Locked On. I've asked this question in Spaces, but I'm going to ask you this question. In the last, I don't know, we'll go back to 1994. What were the best 49ers defenses you saw? I'd say maybe 94, right? With Merton Hanks and Deion Sanders and Tim McDonald and Haley, all those guys, right? So we'll say 94. And then let's give me 2 more years where you felt like 49ers had like a great defense, like some of the best defenses you've seen. Maybe 2000, like Willis, Bowman, maybe.
Yeah, it's got to be Willis and Bowman. They're my favorite. I mean, absolute favorite. I would say those.
Right. And then 2019, I think we've talked about how great of a defense I felt like that was.
Yeah, that was, I mean, that's kind of, and that's the thing. That's been our identity here of recent years, right? Our identity is our defense. And so when we start to see cracks and missed opportunities and penalties, like that's not who we are. We are that gritty team that went into Green Bay in freezing temperatures in the postseason, and our defense won us that game, right? Like, I don't think offensively we put, and it was our special teams and our defense that put points on the board and beat an Aaron Rodgers and their team in Green Bay. So this is who our identity has been. And so I think in Twitter, I actually put out there, I'm like, what is our identity right now? Because I'm not seeing who we were. And it's okay to change, right? It's okay for, there's ebbs and flows and balance changes here and there. But I think as a fan, we're so used to that dominating defense that's suffocating that when we don't see that, we're just kind of like at a loss and don't know what to do.
So we threw out a few years of great defenses, right?
Yeah.
But only one of those teams that we just mentioned between 94, that 2011 to 2013 teams, 2019, we can even go 2021. Only one of those years did the 49ers win the Super Bowl. Now 94. Yeah. What was the difference? What could you say the difference was in that 94 team as opposed to, the Harbaugh years or even the last couple of years with a great defense with Shanahan? There's one glaring one glaring difference.
You're going to say quarterback, yes?
I'm not going to say quarterback, but I am going to say offense, right? Like in the Super Bowl, 49ers beat Chargers, what they scored, 55 points?
Yeah.
Whatever it was.
Yeah, it was 55.
I think right now we're trying to hang our hat so much on, defense identity, stuff, et cetera. Like that's who we are. But when 49ers were at their best, they had a terrific offense as well. And I think right now we can talk all we want about, because it's never just going to be perfect, right? You would love that game where in the Super Bowl where the defense is just shut down, locked down, and the offense can just cruise and score 20 points and win. More times than not, that's probably just not the case. And when these last few weeks, especially last 2 weeks, in my opinion, were a huge test to the offense. I know you didn't have Deebo Samuel or Trent Williams, but to me, it was a huge test. It was a test to see if the defense isn't playing great, if the defense isn't stopping this team every step of the way, and it's hard to get the opposing offense off of the field, can your offense keep up? Can your offense stop the bleeding, right? And so far, they are failing that test to me, which lets me know, like, we can't take this team serious as a Super Bowl contender if you can't do those things. Like if you can't help out the other side of the ball, if you are so reliant on the defense to just always get stops, always get the ball back, and you can't go tit for tat with the Philadelphia Eagles in the biggest game, because I assume that it's going to be really hard to just say, oh, you know what? Philadelphia Eagles will not score 22 plus points against the Niners in the postseason. I have a hard time thinking that. I think that the Philadelphia Eagles are a team that will figure it out at some point in the game, and they'll just score points. I just saw it last week. We were watching. Matter of fact, I got my brother here. He's a Cowboy fan. In the group chat, we were kind of keeping an eye on the Commanders Eagles game. And my big bro, I saw him texting the chat. I think Eagles gonna lose this game. They were down like
Yeah.
10-3, 17-3, whatever it was, 10 to 17, 14, whatever it was. The next thing you know, points, 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 points. They just scored. Next thing you know, you look up, damn, they got 38 points. And they still gave up 24, but they
Yeah.
scored 38. And when you look at the 49ers, I think there's going to be a time where the defense is just struggles to get stops because the other team is good. Can your offense keep up with them? And right now, and I feel like I'm taking crazy pills because I'm the only one really talking about it. I'm like, look, points given up by a defense happens. We just threw out teams, the hardball team. I think the year the 49ers went to the Super Bowl, is that the year they lost to the Seahawks 42-10 or something like that? Remember that game in Seattle? I mean, Seattle destroyed the night. They gave up 42 points,
Yeah.
right? There was a game in one of those years, the 49ers played the New England Patriots, and the 49ers, the defense was like shut down. They're getting turnovers. Next thing you know, you look up and the 49ers had to score like 40 points
Right.
to barely win, right? Like in the game. So like even some of the greatest defenses by the 49ers that we've seen in recent years, like gave up points. Last year, they gave up 40 something to the Kansas City Chiefs, and they also gave up, one incomplete pass to Marcus Mariota and losing to Atlanta. Like those kind of games happen, and they've happened every year.
Yeah.
But for the 49ers to get to where they want, which ultimately is a hoist of Lombardi, I feel like the offense for once since 1994 has to be as good, if not better, than the defense, especially now since everything is so offensively driven. It's an offensive league. The way the refs call games, the flags, the way everything is structured is towards scoring points. And it feels like the 49ers are trying to still play this old school brand, which I think helps you in, play in different type of weather, play on the road, etc. But also you gotta be able to score points. So I'm like the one person that felt like, hey man, this was a big test, and everybody's using Wilkes as a scapegoat. But I think at some point, like your offense just gonna have to score points, even if your defense isn't getting stops, because you're playing against another good offense. And people are like, no, dominating defense. And it's like, well, where has that gotten us? Where has that gotten us? I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
So, a couple things. One, and this is something that I haven't been hearing a lot of. Like, we are without Trent Williams. We are without Trent Williams. He is the foundation of the offense. Brock got hurt because there was no Trent Williams, right? Brock got hurt again because there's no Trent Williams. Christian McCaffrey, there's no lanes because there's no Trent Williams. So if we can't have a running game, how are we taking time off the clock to be able to allow the defense to rest, right? So I was kind of wondering, probably maybe as far back as the Browns game, maybe it was more the Minnesota game. Why were we not doing more screens to Christian McCaffrey? Because we couldn't get any traction going between the tackles, right? So I saw more of that. He kind of started to go to that in this last game. So I did like seeing that. But the absence of Trent Williams is profound on the offense. And I think the reason why a lot of fans are pushing more to the defense is because we don't have a lot of current injuries on the defense. Lord knows I'm not wishing that, but we know at some point we're getting Trent Williams back. At some point we're getting Debo back. And maybe we can fill the gaps on a Debo. I had said, 2 weeks ago, the three pillars of our offense was Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey, and Debo Samuel. And they were all injured at that, in that 1 week when I was last on here. So without those three, that's like having no Nick Bosa, no Fred Warner, and maybe no Trevarius Ward, right? So you get a pass a little bit on the offense because you have so many people injured and those pillars. It's not like Juwan Jennings is injured, right? It's not something like that. So I think that's where a lot of this is coming. But at the end of the day, it's like trying to ask me who's my favorite kid, right? Both sides of the ball is not playing to our expectation or to their expectation, if we're being honest. They're both making sloppy mistakes. They're both causing penalties that's costing the team and special teams. So Brock did parade us down the field for that game-winning potential field goal. and that didn't happen, right? so,
Right.
so he does have the potential. I still wonder if there's, well, let's put it this way. Alex Smith was interviewing Brock Purdy. I don't know where I saw this, but he made the comment. He's like, "Yeah, I've played without Trent Williams too. It's not a good feeling, is it?" And Brock smirked at him and was kind of like, "Yeah, it doesn't. It's not great." So to
I have
have
one pushback on the Trent Williams thing.
okay,
Trent Williams has not played every game in the season since 2013.
right,
So, like, he's someone, while on the field, he is amazing. It's hard to just say, well, every week I can count on him being there, because all he's shown us since 2013, which we're talking about 10 years now, he's going to miss games.
sure,
Now, maybe it's only 2 games. Maybe it's only 3 games, right? So hopefully he kind of just gets his 2 missed games out of there that he just missed, and then he's good for the rest of the year. But for whatever reason, there's just times where Trent misses games. So in the events that he does, it's like, oh, Trent's not out there, so now we can only score 17 points. And defense, because Trent Williams isn't out there, you who really aren't capable of being that great defense right now, you just, you're not built like that. We're trying to do it. That's why we added Chase Young. But yeah. I feel like even if you don't have Trent Williams, Kyle, you got your quarterback. You still got Brandon Ayuk. You still got Christian McCaffrey. You still got George Kittle. You got to figure out a way to still be able to score more than 17 points. And I think that's been an issue. Even with the defense, right? Like, defense not getting stops. All right, offense, well, can you just keep the ball a little bit longer? Can you play a little bit more ball control? Can you get scores? And, they went 3 and out, like 3 out of the first, 4 drives last game or whatever it was.
I think they're figuring us out.
I think that's not going to cut it.
Do you feel that? I feel like the teams are starting to figure us out, that they're starting to understand how to stop the run. And Kyle leans so much on the run, as I think the whole offense does. And when you shut down the run, we become one-dimensional, and that becomes a problem.
I think that Kyle's entire identity is built off the threat of the run game. And when you take that away, I think the 49ers haven't had a great drop back passing game. And there's times where I think Brock is playing very well. And I know we're about to get into Brock right now. I saw Tia earlier talk about, like, man, I saw in the comments, she was like, the turnovers, he's throwing these bad picks and terrible interceptions. But I would say 90% of the time, I think Brock Purdy's playing good football. Like, he's making, like, good throws, throwing passes, etc. But I still think, like, Kyle is, like, I don't want to say he's handcuffing Brock, but it feels like he's like, you know what, Brock, even though you're making good reads, you're making good decisions 90% of the time. That 10% of the time is really ugly. But you're making great position. I'm still not going to put the game in your hands. And maybe there's just like a lack of just 100% trust there. Maybe that's just part of Kyle Shanahan, who we all view him kind of as a control freak. Yeah. But I would like him to say, all right, look, we're only averaging 3 yards per carry. We don't have Trent Williams out there. We can't spring off the big runs. All right, we're going to have to go to a quick game, passing game, get the ball at the quarterback's hands. Let's throw some screens. Let's throw some slants. Let's throw some outs. Let's throw some quick outs. Hey, we're going to run this guy out, run a quick out here.
Scramble.
And
even.
Get more in the rhythm. Maybe utilize his legs. Maybe do some read option, right? Like, Brock can pick up 8 yards on a read option. I mean, now we saw him scramble for more yards, but just on a read option, he could pick up 8, get down, slide. Like, just things that might help. Now, again, I'm people have asked me about scheme. I don't know scheme. Like, defensively, I know basics, and I actually have to learn. I got practice in about an hour and a half at Edison High School. I coach the DBs. My defensive coordinator is Desmond Bishop. So Dez, I was thinking of Larry Grant. I don't know why, but Dez played 9 years in the NFL. He's a linebacker. Played with the Niners for a bit during those hardball years. But Dez, I was like, you know what, Dez, like, I'm gonna give it to you this offseason so I can learn more about, like, the scheme, because a lot of times cornerbacks and back end guys, we know the back end. We might not know exactly how the back end is married with the front end. Linebackers do know that. So you see Robert Saleh and you see, D'Amico Ryan's like, yeah, those are linebacker guys. So they understand. Dez, my defensive quarterback, he understands that because he's a linebacker. Wilkes was a secondary guy. So he's kind of a little bit more like me. Like, we don't sometimes know how the front end is married with the back end. I don't know if that's his issue. He seems like a smart guy. But I know that's something that I have to
But
learn.
he's
Anyway,
really
we've
looking
talked
at
the
the
whole.
secondary sideways then.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh what? That's what he's probably so confused. Like you guys can't do. But he did have a solid secondary in Carolina. He had a solid secondary in Carolina. All right. Let's move on because we've spent a lot of time talking about
Yeah.
that. Ultimately, I do feel like the 49ers will get out of this rut. They'll get back to playing. I just think it was a test, and I think they'll start cruising again. They'll do well, but in the back of my head, I'll always be thinking when your defense can't get stops, when they can't, when they're struggling, offense, can you play above that? Can you help them out? Can you go toe to toe with the team? When the defense gives up 31, can you score 32? We saw that with the Browns. I think the Browns have a terrific defense. Well, the week after they played the 49ers, they gave up 38 points to the Indianapolis Colts. It didn't matter because the Browns scored 39. All right, let's talk about Brock Purdy and kind of where he's at. We've thrown Brock Purdy out there. Oh, wait. Do have a super chat here. Uh, Dezi, I so I still not think Purdy should have played on a short week. What's the NFL concussion protocols in the Army? You are shut down and cannot watch TV, video games, etc. How do you prepare as a quarterback? Great. This is a great question. All right. So first, Brock Purdy, if you haven't been paying attention, which I'm pretty sure all 180 of you watching right now are, hit the like button and subscribe. But if you haven't been paying attention, Brock Purdy suffered a concussion in the Vikings game. On the quarterback sneak, it's clear as day where the contact happened. It was in a rut, kind of, where it was hard for anyone to see. I'm pretty sure the referees didn't see it. There were some people like, how did refs miss that? Like, it's you see so many bodies, and you actually have to kind of see from the top view to actually be able to see the guy come in, and he hit him helmet to helmet. He was concussed after that. Okay. Uh, Now, what I was worried about was second impact syndrome. And I think what Gammon's saying here is like, man, aren't you supposed to shut it down for a while, not watch TV, lights and everything like that? The NFL does have their certain protocols. But Coach Dezi, you tweeted out today, you said today on the Eric Crocker show, we will chat about concussions and why the second impact syndrome was not the biggest fear for Purdy, which it was for me. So I'm excited to hear why it's not. And you'll share your thoughts on the current state of the 49ers and of course Chase Young. We talked about all that. But as far as Brock Purdy goes with the concussion. Why was second impact syndrome? Well, first, can you explain to people what second impact syndrome is?
Yeah, I'm really happy to talk about this because not only do I want to chat with everyone in regards to how this applies our thoughts on the 49ers, but I just think we don't know enough. And for those of us that have student athletes, kids that are playing sports, sometimes I've heard on the sidelines, oh, he's fine, get him back in there. I really want you to understand what happens with a concussion. It's actually a mild traumatic brain injury, right? That makes it sound so much different than just a concussion, right? It is a traumatic brain injury. It's a mild traumatic brain injury. So your brain kind of floats around in your skull. And when you have some sort of forceful impact, that pushes your brain into the skull. It basically collides with the skull. And depending on where in the brain that collision happens can determine some of the symptoms that you have. Basically, neurons, which are the communicators of the current in our body. So when I tell my finger to lift in the air, there's neurons that are sending a message from the brain down the spine out to my arm to say, hey, lift your hand. When you have an injury, those neurons are stretched and there's sort of like a bruising that happens there. Okay. So if you think about if I were to punch somebody in the arm and leave a bruise, how long does it take for that bruise to heal?
It's going to take a few days.
It doesn't take 5 days, right? It usually takes a week, 10 days, depending on what each person's like. So I like to just throw that out there as far as just connecting it with something that we deal with day to day. Now, when a person has concussions, the symptoms can vary. There's 3 different types of concussions. There's 3. You can have a grade 1 concussion, which is you had a head injury without any loss of consciousness. So you were completely aware the entire time. A grade 2 is when you have loss of consciousness. So even if it's for just a split second, a loss of consciousness under 5 minutes is considered a grade 2. And a grade 3 is anything over 5 minutes is a grade 3 concussion. So most of what we're talking about and most of what we see in the NFL is usually a grade 1. It's without loss of consciousness. I suspect that maybe Tua's last year might have been a grade 2. I feel like maybe he had a little bit of loss of consciousness, but there's some other things that go along with that. But that's just the basics there. So symptoms can range, and it's everything from blurred vision to headaches to nausea. You might have vomiting, feeling fatigued, ringing in the ears.
I've had the vomiting before.
Okay, you have.
Real quick little story. I got elbowed spring ball in 2009. I was in junior college. It was like no pads, no nothing. And my guy Vince Andrews caught a pass and he like swung his elbow, caught me right here on my like orbital bone, fractured my orbital bone. But I was on the sideline and I like crawled over to the sideline. I'm like, damn, what the heck is going on? I didn't know what was going on. And I just started throwing up like on the side of the field. Like I couldn't walk. I couldn't like lift my eyes. Like I've never experienced anything like this. But anyways, I ended up having to go to the hospital. Dang, sharp ass elbow. But I had to go to the hospital. And I had a concussion. But I didn't even know up until that point that throwing up or puking was could be part of a concussion. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
I just wanted to say.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's exactly why I'm excited to talk about this, because I don't think people, they kind of know what it is, but they don't know what it is, right? So and it can be just fog brain, like not being able to concentrate, having some memory issues where you're just like, what did I walk, where did my keys go? I left them where, some of that can happen day to day depending on your age, but this is a difference post injury. Okay. So there's this wide range of symptoms that happen afterwards. Some of these, there's a subjective part of this and there's an objective part of this. What I mean by that is subjective. If I don't tell you that I have a headache, there's no way that you're going to be able to determine that I have a headache, right? Unless it's severe enough that it's causing me to not really open my eyes, or unless I have vomiting or something with it. But if I have a mild headache, unless I tell you I have a mild headache, you're not going to know I have a mild headache. And then there's some stuff that's objective, right? Like the vomiting that you had, or the stumbling around, or looking kind of dazed and confused, or not being able to answer questions. Those are objective things. So this is really important to understand, because there's going to be some gray area here that we're going to discuss as we talk about this. So that's just what it is. We talked about the symptoms. We talked about the different grades of concussion. Now, on the other side of that, for the NFL, there's a protocol that they have. And some of this has been changed since the Tua incident last year. But there's something. They have athletic trainers and unofficial neurosurgeons that are in the booth, that are on the sideline, that help to keep an eye on what's happening, right? Because the viewers watched Tua. We all knew at home that he had a serious injury, and then he came out after halftime and got back on the field. And it was because I think the person who evaluated him, the physician that evaluated him, did not see the injury happen. I don't think they had that information, or something like that happened. So now they have a lot of eyes on the field, which is why I was kind of like, when Brock had that injury, no one in the booth saw that. No one questioned it. So it's a little surprising to me. But I say that to say they have changed some of these protocols and done some things. Once a player has a concussion, there's a 5-step return to play that happens. And that is, so kind of Gammon, I kind of have to tease this out because I'm doing two things. To answer your question, Gammon, yes, what the Army does and what we do clinically for people that are not athletes is we say, go home, don't stress yourself out. No getting on your phone, no looking at any screens, no TV, kind of just lay low, because all of that still stresses the nerves, right? The neurons in the brain. It's still data that your brain's collecting, still kind of forcing yourself to utilize things that just really, you're kind of shutting off your neurosystem. Just kind of quiet room, dark room, just take things slow. So, and as you feel better, you can do things as tolerated, but even still, in terms of day-to-day, you and I out there in the world, we're going to be told, okay, you have a concussion. If you go to the emergency room for it, depending on the severity, we would do imaging. Now, imaging does not diagnose a concussion. There is no way to diagnose a concussion from an imaging standpoint. What you're doing with imaging is confirming that you don't have another injury, like a bleed in the brain, or that you don't have swelling of the brain, or you don't have a fracture of the skull. Those are the things that you're looking for in terms of imaging. So back to the NFL, they have a protocol. I'm sure they image. I didn't run through this whole thing, but I did find that there is a concussion game day checklist. Croc, I sent that to you. I don't know if you want to bring that up or not, but basically it's going over everything that they do on the sidelines at the time of a potential concussion injury. They run them through an evaluation. There's something called the Maddox questions that are being asked, and that's kind of all pertaining to the game. Do you know which stadium you're at? Do you know what half we're in? Who scored the last points? These kind of game-specific questions to just kind of do a quick cognitive assessment of, do you know what's going on? They look at the eye movements, they evaluate speech, their gait. So they go through this neuro exam, and then they determine this whole thing that says, if this, then that. So if they have any of these things, they do not go back on the field. If they clear all of this stuff, they can go back on the field. Now, go back to what I said with some of these things, some of the symptoms are subjective. So again, if I'm a player and I clear all this and my intention is to get back on the field, am I going to tell you that I still have a little low level fuzziness going on, or I may have a little something going on? They're not going to tell you. And maybe some do, some don't. But again, as a parent, as someone who may have an athlete in your family, be aware of who your athlete is and be someone that is protective of them. I know there's been times where my kids have gotten drilled with a soccer ball hard enough that I was like, yeah, he's out. He's gonna sit out. I would do an assessment. I'm a medical provider. Some volunteer coach is not going to be able to do an assessment to determine whether my kid can go back on the field. So be the guardian and protector of your athletes when there's not someone there. The recommendations from the American Academy of Neurology is, in order to be cleared to return to sport, you really should be evaluated by a concussion specialist. Those are technically neurologists, or at least your pediatrician, where they'll probably do whatever assessments, and either they'll feel confident, but neurologists are really the ones who should be doing the evaluations to put your athlete back on the field. So if they go back on the field, they'll continue to play. If they don't, then they go into the concussion protocol. In the I sent you, Croc, also the 5 steps for return. Do you have that?
Yeah, let me download that real quick, and boom.
I'm trying to bring it up in case I can get to it quicker. Here we go. So as you bring it up, I'll just go ahead and chat about it. Step 1 is, I just had it.
Right here, I got it on my screen.
You got it? Okay. Okay, so step 1 is symptom limited activity. So they're really, not doing a whole lot. They're just kind of like what Gammon said. We're just kind of just allowing the system to rest, not doing a whole heck of a lot, constantly being monitored, and then can go into step 2 once their symptoms start to become diminished. Then you can start to, or absent, then they can go into aerobic exercise. So this is maybe doing some walking, some light jogging, maybe getting on a bike, and just starting to get some movement going, and just assessing, does any recurrence of symptoms happen with exercise? How are you handling things? Again, constantly being monitored. In phase 3, it's football specific exercise. So they're allowed to get on the field, throw the ball. There's no contact. They can start working on strength training at this point, some light strength training.
And that was Brock last week when they said he's not cleared, but he had a helmet on. He was able to throw the ball, couldn't participate in certain things though.
Yes, correct. And so step 4 is, okay, they can run through actual drills now. He can, be out there, but no contact. And so this is where I thought he was late in the week, and I really didn't expect him to get cleared, because I was like, okay, he's not even at contact yet. But they cleared him for phase 5 for full football activity and contact. So these are the steps. They're being monitored along the way. There is something that they use specifically for, I think, did you talk about it before, where they do, they put you through a bunch of questions before you even ever have a concussion? And
Yeah,
then
so they want to see how you respond. So they put you on this computer screen, and the bunch of different shapes. You go through these things. I don't know, maybe it's like a few minutes of just showing you different shapes, and every time you see it, you just click a button, it goes to the next shape. Well, they put you through that twice and get like an average of whatever your response is based on what you say you see. And then when you are concussed, they go back to that test. And part of clearing concussion protocol is, and again, this was the New York Jets. I don't know if everybody does this, but part of clearing concussion protocol was your answers and your responses have to be similar to what they were when you were not concussed.
Right. So it's a sport concussion assessment tool, and it's usually performed by medical professionals. And there's some physical exam components to it that are answered on here. There's memory questions. There's questions where you have to figure out, you count backwards, figure out the months of the year backwards from December, November, October. You kind of have to do that. They'll give you a couple of objects. You have to name the objects, and then they take them away, and then you have to recall which objects are there. So there's a whole assessment that can be done to kind of check in on the cognitive part of the injury. So this is a lot. There's a lot of stuff to this. There's a lot of data out there, but there's still a lot that we don't know. There's no objective way other than an exam to say, you're good to go. It doesn't mean that everything's healed up, because we can't diagnose it through any kind of imaging. So the complications from a concussion is just long-term headaches. You can get long-term vertigo, which is spinning. You kind of always feel like you're on a ship. Persistent post-concussive symptoms. So that's just having symptoms that last longer than 3 weeks. 15 to 20% of people will get that. But then the one that we were talking about was second impact syndrome. And that is something that is really, really, really rare. If anyone was going to get it, I think it'd be Tua, but they can't even say that it's based on severity. So there was let me find it real quick. There was an interesting case that they brought up in this article that I saw, where an athlete, it sounded like it was a football player, had gotten a concussion and had a negative imaging on day 4, and then got concussed again and ended up having.
So he had the negative imaging, which should prevent him to be on the field, but they played him anyways?
No, a negative imaging means that he didn't have anything.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Seen again, you can't. The only thing you're doing imaging for is to make sure you don't have a bleed or a fractured skull or something like that. Where did I find it? I really wanted to share this. Maybe I'm not going to find it. Sorry, guys. But here we go. A recent case report shed some light on the injury pattern. An athlete returned to hitting drills 5 days after his initial concussion. He had a normal CAT scan on day 4, but had a persistent severe headache. After getting hit at practice 1 day later, he collapsed several plays later after complaining of headaches and not being able to feel his legs. A second CAT scan done in an emergency room demonstrated that he had hematoma, so that's bleeding in the brain. And then the MRI later showed that there was herniation so the brain connects to the spinal column through a hole in the skull, and that when the brain swells so much, it'll push through that hole, and that can cause death. And so this is something that is life-threatening. And so, as you can see, the patient in this case was demonstrating severe headaches. So again, if you're someone that's having severe headaches and you can muscle through, or you can mask it with medication, and you say, no, I don't have any headaches, and you go out there, it can be a problem. So
Mm.
I was really concerned about that in terms of Tua's injury, because I felt like before halftime and after halftime was not nearly enough time to heal before sustaining. I turned that game off. I didn't want to see it. I thought it was really going to happen for him. So there's a lot of other things that can happen from concussions, not just that. And so please protect your athletes. Please be aware, if you have an athlete that's going to be like, I'm going to go out there no matter what, that's the one you sit down. So that's, thanks for letting me share with you guys a little bit
Definitely.
about concussions, because they can be very dangerous.
That's very knowledgeable. And I think, because we look at the players and guys get cleared, from concussion protocol so often, we don't realize exactly what goes into it, how they feel, and some of the worries. So we did see Brock Purdy hit his helmet on the ground last game, and which they call roughing the passer. I just don't think that was roughing the passer. But also I'm pro defense though, and I just feel like they've handcuffed the defense so much. But that would have been his third interception, not ideal. Then he fumbled the next play. I think he was fine then. Real quick, because I see a big debate going on in the chat.
Yeah.
I think Brock Purdy is playing exactly how he played last year for the most part. Now, my co-host says a little bit less frenetic, but as far as if you felt like he played well last year, I think he is playing exactly the same this year, and I think he's playing well. The biggest difference, in my opinion, is those interceptable passes he threw last year that weren't caught are being caught now, and I think that skewed how everybody thinks about him. But I think he does all the same things he did well last year. He's doing those things, those playing with timing and rhythm. Some of the throws he's been able to make, layered throws, like he made some big throws last game. So there are a lot of people talking about benching him and stuff like that. And I think like whatever he's going through right now, let him figure that out and go through it. Now, obviously, if it just continues, then it's like, all right, like where do we draw the line with, most of the game he's playing very well, but then in big moments he's throwing these interceptions or this happens, and oh man, he just has to play so specific because he doesn't have quite the same type of arm talent as other guys. So he has to throw so much with anticipation that if the receiver is slightly off, oh man, it's an interception, and I think that's tough, right? Like, but overall, I think he's playing like he played last year. So if you were excited about him last year and you like how he played, he's playing the same. They're just catching the interceptions now, and I think that has kind of changed how some people view him. But in my opinion, I think he's fine. I just never viewed him though as like an elite quarterback, and I always knew what he needed. So maybe just my expectations aren't quite as high as other people as well.
Yeah.
I just look at him like, hey man, he kind of needs these things in place. These things in place, he can execute, plays well. If the plays are there offensively, cool. You make play with his legs, like those are cool. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I know a lot of people are.
I know a lot of people are asking, do they think that his play was caused by the concussion? It can be. That's the honest truth. It really can be. But the only person that's truly going to know that is probably Brock, and maybe his parents, or maybe Shannon, like people who know him and know what his true habits are, know his, you can't hide everything. And sometimes, for instance, my son came home, this was during COVID shut down in March, April, he came home, I came home from work, and he just didn't look like himself. My husband went home all day with him. His brother's home all day with him. No one said anything to me, right? I come home, I'm like, something's wrong. I diagnosed that kid with an appendicitis within like an hour of being home. Sent him, he didn't have any vomiting, didn't have a fever, nothing but a tummy ache, right? Who's going to think that's an appendicitis? But sometimes people just know somebody so well. That's why I said the parents. And I just knew, looking at my son, I'm like, I think this is what's going on. And of course I could do a physical exam, but my point is, like, sometimes things are so subtle that to the masses that don't really know him or aren't with him day to day, they're not going to pick that up. But it would be somebody that's really close with him, maybe his fiance, something like that, that can pick up on like, you're just kind of a little forgetful right now. Or maybe your decision making is just a little odd, like somebody that close. And so I've always credited Brock with someone that's really protective of the ball. So maybe that's just me thinking. Again, this is all going to be us guessing, our best guess, but I don't know. I don't think the Brock that I've seen up to this point would have been that careless, but maybe. So I don't know. Is it concussion? Is it not? The truth is, we're never going to know that answer unless Brock wants to come forth with any kind of information, which we all know he's not going to, even if it is or isn't. So I'm glad that we have the bye week. We need to reset both sides of the ball. I want Moody to continue to kick that ball through the uprights. And I think I saw a really funny meme. It was like talking about, the most underused player. We need to get him off the bench more was Wishnowsky. We need to get him. He's the stud guy that we need more action from.
He's playing well. You're definitely getting a high level of consistency from him. Before we get out of here, Gammon had a super chat here. He says, according to sources, in Washington coaches view Chase Young as undisciplined, deviating from assignments, lack of commitment to his craft, and plateaued as a rookie. I think a lot of that comes with young guys relying on just natural athleticism, being a freak, and thinking that's going to get you by at the NFL level, and clearly it didn't. Now, obviously, towards ACL, I wonder how much that had to do with it. And then also, this year, 5 sacks. Again, that's leading the 49ers currently. He's kind of stepping into that role. So maybe as he matured a little bit, he learned more how to deal with being a pro, dealing with money, right? Like I could only imagine being drafted at 20, 21 years old. You have these millions, right? I mean, and all of a sudden you come in with all these high expectations. I'm pretty sure like Trey Lance has had to deal with that and the scrutiny of it and then overcoming injuries and that type of adversity. And then figuring out a way to kind of bounce back to where now you have the best start to your career in year 4. So I would say that that's encouraging more than discouraging to actually see this. Like I actually like this. Okay. They didn't view him as this guy, but this year something is changing. But for them now, it's like, well, we're not re-signing him. So hopefully he just continues to play well for the 49ers and we don't have to worry about the guy that was deviating from assignments.
Well, in Washington, they have a reputation, right? Like I know they cleaned house, air quotes, but how much of that is truly gone in terms of the behind the scenes people? That's why we got Trent Williams. He was not happy in Washington, right? There's been some potential unsupportive things that could have been part of his journey for Chase Young that he'll fully have, hopefully, in San Francisco.
Hopefully. But that's going to do it for this episode. I'll see you next week. And hopefully I see you next week in Jacksonville. I won't know I don't know. Maybe I'll know by the end of the week if I'm going to travel out there. I haven't been to a game all year. So it's like, all right, let's go to some better weather. It's getting a little cold here, a little nippy here in Stockton, California. But Coach Dezi, I thank you and appreciate you for coming on.
All right. Thank you. Go Niners.
All right. Thank you, everybody else, man. Appreciate you guys. Hit the like button, subscribe button. Underdog Fantasy, promo code Crocky. Download the app or go to underdogfantasy.com. They'll double your deposit up to $500, not $100, as it says below. But that's going to do it from Croc and Coach Dezi. I'll see y'all next Monday. Peace.